Ronnie Hawkins is back this week to talk about Donnie's style of guitar. And we'll hear as well from Shawne Jackson, who knows Donnie as a composer, producer, and friend.
I started listening to like blues players first, like B.B. King, Albert King, people like that. I guess they were my first early influences, and Freddie King, that type of guitar. And I got interested in, I really sort of liked anybody who could play guitar, I mean, I liked Chet Atkins, and I would listen to something B.B. King and try to apply that to what I wanted to do, or listen to like jazz players like Wes Montgomery, people like that, or like a lot of records that would come out, like R&B records and things, or rock records, whatever. Like sometimes it would be a singer, it would be no group, it'd just be like studio musicians, but you would hear a few things that you would like. The other thing I've always listened to, more than just guitar players actually though, is just the overall thing. I mean, I found myself always listening to other instruments like piano, horns, and I would try to incorporate what I heard overall onto the guitar rather than just listening to guitar players, Right, well, I was just always more intrigued by the overall thing you could do rather than just, like, I've never been into playing guitar by myself. I mean, in terms of wanting to be like a solo guitar, just playing guitar, like, let's say like a Segovia or something. I mean, that's never really intrigued me. The thing I've always liked, a band has always been to me like another instrument, like sort of like a vehicle for what I like to do.
Donnie has mastered a style of electric guitar which was developed in Toronto by one of Ronnie Hawkins' first guitarists, Robbie Robertson of the band.
And of course, Donnie Troiano was just a young kid, used to come up to watch us play at the Concord on Saturday afternoons when he could get in, when they were allowing kids to come in on the one side.
I wouldn't allow him.
And but he got good, and Donnie is he's a top-notch hand. He worked hard. It was his only thing was his guitar. Like he did very little. I mean, he had very little recreation, very little of anything. His guitar was it, and he practiced day and night. He was one of them that was a Robbie Robertson fan. Robbie was the best in the country. Robbie did things back then. No one will ever know how great Robbie was, except those who got to see him. They got to see him in Canada because of the places that we played, but we didn't record, so it's not on record. The last thing he did on record was in 1961. That's him playing on Bo Diddley and Who Do You Love, which are still classics as far as the guitar work goes. I can't believe it. And he wasn't anywhere near his potential at that time. He just started to pick lead. But in 63 and 4 and 5, I mean, Eric Clapton and all them cats would have to quit. They'd go back to school and learn another trade. But he is the master of that funk version, like Donnie's Troiano style of rock and roll. The bending of the strings and the steel picks and the sustaining the notes without any of the electronic gimmicks. Robbie did it all with his fingers and his guitar. He didn't have any push buttons. In fact, the first fuzz tone built was called the Robbie button. Pete Traynor built it in Canada, and because young kids were wanting to get that sound that Robbie had, and he didn't patent it. Then a couple of years later, the fuzz tone come out, and it was exactly the same thing. But Robbie didn't use a fuzz tone. Robbie knew his guitar and his amp, and he knew by turning a certain way he'd get the feedback from his pickups into his amplifier, and it would sustain notes, and it would sound fuzzy. And so he did it with his hands, his fingers, and his guitar and his amp. So everybody was amazed. It took him years to figure out how he was doing that.
A portrait of Don Troiano on this program of Concert Canadien.
I mean, with Shawne, it's a very easy thing because the kind of music she likes to do is really like an R&B oriented type of thing, okay? Which a lot of people consider commercial music nowadays. I like writing that type of music, and I like producing and arranging that type of music and participating in it on record.
I think I was 15 or 16. Donnie was 18, and he came in to replace the guitar player that they had with the band, the Rogues. I think they were called the Rogues at the moment, yeah. And Donnie and I just had a natural affinity for one another, We just always got along really well, and we used to play hooky together and go to movies together and talk about what we wanted to be when we got older together and stuff like that. We became good friends, and he used to say to me when I was 16, Jackson, you know, one of these days I'm going to get a lot of bread and I'm going to record you. And I'd say, yeah, okay, Don. Because I was never serious about singing, you know. And it went on like that, and he kept, like, when he went to a new band like the Mandela, right, we always kept in contact, and he'd write me postcards, and he'd say, are you getting ready to record? I mean, this was like years and years and years ago. And I'd say, yeah, Don, I'm ready to record. And we went on and went on and went on. Then he was with the James Gang. And I was living in Phoenix at the time, and I got a call, and he said, we've got studio time next week. Can you fly into LA? And that's how we did it.
I think you find that most players are into soloing and getting that kind of thing. It's not a conscious thinking effort, because if you're consciously thinking of what you're going to do next, you're always too busy thinking to play. You know, it's a matter of, I think most people who like to play that way, and again, like we'll use the word jazz, meaning that type of thing, soloing, ad-libbing, you know, like you get your playing to a point where you don't have to think about it. I find myself that when I'm playing in that kind of situation and I'm enjoying, you know, like you're into it, it's like your mind's almost blank. I mean, like you don't have a time to think about it. Like you can't stop and go back and say, hold it, I didn't like that. I mean, it's there, it happens, and you do something, and that leads you, you know, like you do one thing, that makes you think of something else, that triggers off another thing, and it's a constant flow. And other good players can help you do that, because what they're doing will trigger off ideas in your head. And that's the difference between great music and in between music. You know, when it's on that way, certain nights, it doesn't happen all the time. It's great. You know, I mean, that kind of music or that kind of thing is demanding music. I mean, it's not like you sit there and do your housework or something as you're listening to records. I mean, you know, you got to be listening to what's happening, or you don't get anything out of it. I'm saying there's a lot of people who aren't interested in listening, and on the other hand, there are people who really get into it and want to listen, want to learn. I mean, there's musicians, let's say, who would like listening because they want to learn. And on like I say, on the great nights, it can be, it's the emotional thing too. On great nights, people who play or don't play, people who understand or don't understand, when there's that much energy and that much enthusiasm and that much, you know, like that much of a pitch, like high intensity music, whether you understand it or not, I mean, that can get to people.
Our featured artist this week on Concert Canadien was Domenic Troiano. Our thanks as well to Shawne Jackson and Ronnie Hawkins. Plan to be with us again next week, as our featured guests will be Ian and Sylvia Tyson. This series of programs has been made possible through grants from Famous Players Limited, the Canada Council, and Imperial Oil Limited. Additional assistance was provided by Radio York, Xerox of Canada Limited, and the Royal Bank of Canada.